Joshua stood before the Jordan. Behind him was wilderness, 40 years of wandering, of circling, of delays and detours, a generation buried in sand and silence. Before him was promise, land flowing with milk and honey, the fulfillment of what had been spoken to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But between the two stood the Jordan River, at flood stage, impassable and swollen with the rains. The promise was real, but it wasn't automatic. It required a crossing. And not just a crossing in the natural, but a crossing in the spirit. The priests were given a command. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. But the waters did not part before they moved. The miracle did not precede the step. It followed it. The waters remained closed until the feet of the priests touched the brink of the river. This is the divine pattern. The Red Sea parted before Israel moved, but the Jordan parted as they moved. One was deliverance, the other was possession. Deliverance meets you in your bondage, but possession waits for your obedience. So it is with a victorious life. The inheritance of the believer is not passive. It does not fall like manna in the wilderness. It must be taken, claimed, walked into, and the first key of a victorious life is this: you must step into what your feet have not yet touched. You must walk into the unknown, not because you see the path, but because you see the presence. The ark went before them, not the warriors, not the leaders, the ark, the presence of God, the mercy seat, the tablets of the covenant, the budding rod, the jar of manna. It was the divine throne set upon human shoulders, carried across the waters of impossibility, and it moved ahead of them. The people were told to keep a distance of 2,000 cubits from the ark. Why? Because the way they were about to go, they had never been before. There was no map, no path, no previous record of how to do this, but the ark would lead the way. So it is with us. The victorious life is not found in the realm of the familiar. It is not found in the places you have already walked. It begins the moment you step into territory you've never touched before, when you obey beyond your understanding, when you praise in the dark, when you forgive before the apology, when you give before the harvest, when you believe before you see. That is the threshold of victory. God did not tell Joshua to wait for the waters to receive. He told the priests to carry the ark directly into the current, at flood stage, at maximum depth, at the moment when the river was most dangerous. Why? Because the power of God is not revealed in calm waters. It is revealed in the impossible. And the step of faith is not a step into safety. It is a step into risk, into trust, into surrender. But as their feet touched the water, the river stood still. It was cut off far upstream at a place called Adam. The flow from Adam was stopped. The waters piled up and the people passed through. There is a mystery hidden here. The river that had to be stopped for them to enter the promise began at a place called Adam. It is no accident. For the flow that blocks us from our inheritance is a current that began with Adam, the current of sin, of fear, of doubt, of flesh. And the ark, the picture of Messiah, of grace, of sacrifice, of covenant, goes into that current and breaks it. The power that comes from Adam is cut off by the presence, but not until the priest's feet touch the water. You cannot wait for things to become easy before you obey. You cannot wait for the waters to part before you move. You must step in. The victory is not on the shore. The victory is not in the waiting. The victory is in the crossing. Faith is not proven by comfort. It is proven by movement. God said to Joshua, "Every place the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. But if your feet never move, you will never possess what is already yours." But God says, you cannot cross. You must walk it to claim it. You must tread it to take it. The promise exists. The land exists, but it is not yours until you step in. Victory is not a place. It is not a destination marked on a map, not a feeling, not a moment of applause or a crown of ease. Victory in the pattern of the scriptures is not where the battle ends. It is the battle itself, won in the midst of warfare, forged in the fire of resistance. Joshua did not enter a land of rest. He entered a land of war. The promised land was not empty, it was occupied. Cities fortified with high walls, giants walking the land, kingdoms ready to resist. The promise was real, but so was the opposition. God had said, "Every place the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you." But he did not say it would be uninhabited. He said it was given, but not without a fight. And this reveals the divine paradox. What is given must still be taken. The land was theirs, but the sword was still needed. The inheritance was written, but the battle had to be fought. And so it is with every child of the covenant. You are not called to comfort. You are called to conquest. You are not called to float into victory. You are called to war for it. The moment Joshua entered the land, the warfare began. Jericho did not welcome them. It shut its gates. Ai did not surrender. It struck back. 5 kings did not negotiate. They united to destroy. But every battle brought a deeper possession of the land. Every war revealed the faithfulness of the Lord. Every enemy uncovered a new dimension of his power. The sword was not a sign of failure. It was a sign of fulfillment. Because the battle is the process through which the promise becomes reality. The victorious life is not one without trial, without hardship, without resistance. In fact, if you are walking in your inheritance, resistance is guaranteed. The enemy does not fight those who are no threat. The enemy does not resist those who remain in the wilderness. He resists those who dare to enter Canaan. He opposes those who take possession. If you are facing a battle, if the walls are rising high, if the enemy is pressing in, then you are likely on the edge of your inheritance. Before the shout that brought down the walls of Jericho, before the long day when the sun stood still in the sky, before the victories and the taking of cities, came a command that seemed small to the natural eye, but immense in the realm of the Spirit. It was the word that the Lord spoke to Joshua and to the people. "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." This was not a suggestion, not an optional spiritual preparation. It was a prerequisite. Wonders do not follow strategy. Wonders follow sanctification. The miraculous is not birthed in the strength of the arm, but in the purity of the heart. The land was promised, but the people had to be consecrated. The victory was assured, but the vessels had to be clean. Sanctification is not an emotional state or a religious ceremony. It is a separation, a cutting off, a setting apart. In Hebrew, the word is kodash, meaning to make holy, to prepare, to dedicate. It is the act of removing the profane so that the sacred may dwell. Before the presence could go before them into the waters, the people had to be sanctified. Before the ark could be lifted, the hearts had to be bowed. God does not move in power through defiled vessels. He does not entrust his glory to those who hold on to the idols of Egypt. The wonders of tomorrow are dependent on the sanctification of today. In the wilderness, the people were given manna, daily provision even in rebellion. But now they were crossing over. And in Canaan, the manna ceased. The food of the land replaced the food from heaven. The season had changed. And with that change came a higher calling. No longer would they be fed while wandering. They were now to feed themselves while possessing. Maturity in the Spirit always leads to greater responsibility. With promise comes weight. With inheritance comes holiness. The land was not just any land. It was holy ground. And holy ground demands a holy people. There was a moment after crossing the Jordan when the people faced defeat at Ai, a small city, easily conquerable by the logic of man, but they were routed. Not because their strategy was flawed, but because there was sin in the camp. One man, Achan, had taken what was forbidden. One hidden compromise brought judgment upon an entire army. The pattern had not changed. Sanctify the people, or the power will lift. Root out the defilement, or the victory will slip through your hands. What is hidden in your tent will determine what is possible on the battlefield. Sanctification is not about appearing righteous. It is about being clean before God. It is not for the approval of men, but for the alignment with heaven. It requires honesty, humility, the willingness to lay bare what has been buried, to tear down what has been tolerated. The victorious life is not just about walking into promise. It is about purging what stands in the way of presence. There are things that may not be sin in the eyes of others, but they are weight in your spirit. There are distractions that dilute your authority, entanglements that weaken your walk, compromises that delay your calling. Before the taking of Jericho, the Lord told Joshua to circumcise the new generation. The old generation had perished, but the sign of the covenant had been neglected. No one born in the wilderness had been circumcised. They had wandered, but not been marked. So the Lord required a return to the covenant, a cutting away of the flesh, a painful, personal, private act. And only after that was done did the Lord say, "This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." It was in the sanctification that the shame was lifted. It was in the cutting that the healing came. You cannot walk in freedom if Egypt is still clinging to your soul. You cannot possess the land if the wilderness still defines your mind. The patterns of the past must be severed. The identity of bondage must be broken. Sanctification is not about achieving perfection. It is about yielding to purification. It is saying to the Lord, search me and know me, cleanse me, remove what hinders, burn what is unholy. The fire of consecration must come before the shout of victory. The altar must be rebuilt before the rain can fall. The oil flows where the vessel has been emptied of self. The Ark of the Covenant was the center of every victory, and at the center of the Ark were the tablets of the Word. The standard never shifted. The covenant never faded. God had not changed. His presence would lead, but only when the people were aligned. The cloud had lifted. The pillar of fire had ceased. Now they were to follow the Word, and the Word demanded sanctification. The victorious life is not powered by gifting, charisma, or skill. It is birthed in consecration. It is sustained by holiness. It is sealed in obedience. The wonders of the Lord begin not with action, but with sanctification. At the center of Israel's journey into the land of promise, at the heart of every battle, every march, every miracle, was the Ark of the Covenant. It was not an ornament. It was not a symbol. It was the throne of the invisible, the dwelling place of the holy, the container of covenant. Where the Ark went, the people followed. When the Ark moved, the camp moved. When the Ark stood still, no one dared to proceed. It was not just a sacred object. It was the manifestation of God's presence among his people. And this is the fourth key of a victorious life. The covenant must remain at the center. The ark was made of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, incorruptible and radiant. Within it were the tablets of the law, the very word of God written by his own finger. Alongside the tablets was the jar of manna, the bread from heaven, the daily provision in the wilderness. And beside that, the rod of Aaron that budded, the sign of divine selection and resurrection life. These were not arbitrary objects. They were revelations. They were testimonies. The word, the provision, and the authority, all sealed within the ark and overshadowed by the mercy seat. And above the mercy seat, the glory, the Shekinah, the cloud by day and fire by night, the unseeable made visible. Every victory Joshua and the children of Israel experienced was traced back to that center. When they marched around Jericho, they did not carry weapons at the front. The priests did not blow horns from behind the lines. The ark was at the forefront. 7 priests went before it with trumpets, but it was the ark borne upon shoulders that led the procession. The victory did not come through military power or strategy. It came because the covenant was central. The presence was honored. The word was upheld, and the obedience was precise. Before Joshua ever raised a sword, before he led a charge, before he saw a city fall, there was a moment in the stillness, a moment that did not take place in the camp, nor on the battlefield, but on holy ground. It was just outside of Jericho, a land of enemies, and it was there that Joshua encountered a man with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua, the commander of Israel's armies, did not shrink back. He approached and asked, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" And the reply came not as an answer, but as a correction. "Commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." And in that one answer came the revelation that defines the victorious life. The battle does not belong to you. You are not the center of the war. Victory does not come because God joins your side. It comes when you join his. Joshua fell on his face and worshipped. The man with the sword was not just a messenger. He was the captain, the one who commands heaven's hosts. And he did not come to serve Joshua's strategy. He came to reveal heavens. He said, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy." The same words spoken to Moses in the wilderness, now spoken to Joshua in the land of conquest. Because the key to the battle is always the same: worship before warfare, reverence before strategy, surrender. It was not Joshua's plan that brought Jericho down. It was not human logic that caused the walls to fall. It was not man's timing that held the sun in the sky. It was divine alignment. It was a man who knelt before the true commander. It was a people who marched in obedience. The victorious life is not lived through human willpower, but through divine direction. The power of victory lies in the presence of the commander. And the commander is not obligated to fight for your agenda. He calls you to surrender to his. There is a subtle temptation to bring God into your plans, to pray that he would bless your desires, that he would empower your goals, that he would walk with you where you've already decided to go. But the victorious life requires the opposite. It requires that you lay your sword down and ask, not is God with me, but am I with him? The shift is not in divine allegiance. It is in human submission. The kingdom does not conform to our path. We must conform to its king. The Battle of Jericho was won in heaven before it was ever fought on earth. The outcome was not determined by might or numbers, but by obedience to the commander's voice. March once each day for 6 days. Say nothing. Blow the shofar. Carry the ark. March 7 times on the 7th day. Shout only when commanded. None of it made sense in the eyes of flesh. None of it would pass the standards of military logic. But the walls did not fall to logic. They fell to obedience. The victorious life is one of precision, not perfection, but alignment. Joshua did not argue with the command. He did not modify the instructions to fit his understanding. He submitted. The victory was birthed in the fear of the Lord, the reverence that caused him to fall face down, the submission that led him to remove his sandals. You cannot wear your own shoes on holy ground. You cannot walk in victory with feet clothed in self-direction. The ground of conquest must be walked in humility, in bare reverence, in total dependence. There is a commander who sees beyond what you see. He sees the hidden fortresses. He sees the alliances of your enemies. He sees the snares before they form, the battles before they surface. To walk in victory is to listen for his voice before you lift your sword, to inquire before you advance, to pause before you presume. The defeated AI came because there was no pause, no inquiry, only assumption. An assumption is the thief of victory. But when Joshua returned to the posture of surrender, when the people returned to the place of listening, the tide turned. Victory is not the absence of warfare. It is the presence of the commander. It is knowing who truly leads. It is no longer trusting in chariots or horses, but in the name of the Lord your God. It is not rushing into battle with your own blueprint, but waiting until the captain speaks. And when he speaks, it is done. When he draws his sword, the armies of heaven move. And when you walk behind him, not in front of him, the walls cannot stand. The sun will wait. The enemy will flee. Because the victory was never yours. It was always his. There is a moment at the end of Joshua's life, a scene not on the battlefield, but in the assembly of the people. Not with a sword in hand, but with a word on his lips. The promise had become the possession. And now the old warrior stood before the tribes and spoke not of war, but of choice. He looked upon a nation dwelling in houses they did not build, reaping from vineyards they did not plant, living in the fulfillment of what had once only been spoken. And he said, I choose this day whom you will serve, not in the wilderness, not on the edge of the Jordan, but in the land of inheritance. Because even in the land of promise, the heart must choose. The victorious life is not sealed in one battle. It is not secured by one miracle. It is not sustained by one breakthrough. The life of victory must be renewed each day by the choices made in secret and in public, by the decisions whispered in the chambers of the heart. Joshua had seen the miracles, walked through the parted Jordan, heard the walls of Jericho collapse, seen the sun stand still. But miracles do not sustain obedience. Signs do not guarantee devotion. The heart must choose again and again whom it will follow. Joshua declared, As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Not we will observe. Not we will believe. Not we will occasionally remember. We will serve. This is the language of surrender, of daily obedience, of walking not according to preference, but according to the covenant. The land had been given, but now the heart must be kept. The cities had been won, but now the soul must not drift. The danger in Canaan was no longer the sword of the enemy. It was the seduction of idolatry. There were gods in the land, foreign altars, ancient spirits, hidden temptations dressed in the customs of the Canaanites. It was easy to win a war with a sword, but the war of the soul is quieter. It comes not with a shout, but with a whisper. It is not fought in the field, but in the heart. And Joshua, the warrior of conquest, understood this final truth. The victorious life is not only about what you fight, it is about what you remain faithful to. The same voice that called him to march around walls now called him to guard his house. The same Lord who gave him victory in battle now required faithfulness in rest. There is a battle after the battle, a war that begins when the swords are sheathed. It is the war for your worship, the war for your allegiance. And it is fought not in public moments of glory, but in private choices of loyalty. The idols do not shout,
They wait. They wait until your guard is lowered, until comfort settles in, until the urgency of conquest gives way to the routine of blessing. And then they speak, subtly, quietly, promising control, pleasure, safety, power. But they take what they do not give. They consume what they promise to fulfill. Joshua's words carried the weight of a man who had seen both the fire and the silence, the power of God and the weakness of men. He had seen a generation die in the wilderness because they would not believe. And he saw a generation rise to take the land because they chose to obey. But the same people who had conquered cities would now be tested in prosperity, because prosperity reveals the heart in a way adversity cannot. The wilderness had its trials, but Canaan had its choices. The victorious life must be guarded. The victories must be stewarded. The inheritance must be maintained, not with a sword, but with a vow, not with conquest, but with consecration. The covenant must be remembered. The word must be rehearsed. The altars must be rebuilt, for it is in the moments of peace that compromise first takes root. When the need is not urgent, the heart must be intentional. When the pressure lifts, the passion must remain, because the greatest threat to victory is not the enemy without. It is the apathy within. Joshua called the people to put away the foreign gods among them and incline their hearts to the Lord. He did not merely speak of removing idols. He spoke of inclining, of directing the affections, of turning the will. Because victory does not only dwell in the hands, it lives in the heart. It flows from what the soul loves most, and whatever the heart worships will ultimately shape the path. The gods of the Amorites were still present, still lingering. The call was not simply to avoid them, but to actively reject them, to choose, to commit. The final key to a victorious life is enduring loyalty, a heart that chooses daily, a house that serves wholly, a soul that remembers when others forget, a people who do not grow soft in blessing, who do not drift in comfort, who do not blend into the land but remain distinct, devoted and unwavering, not because the land is free of enemies, but because the presence of God remains the greatest treasure.